Uh-oh.
Up in her last two fights. Good way hitting him from that way down.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. The latest updates to the women's Ring IQ pound-for-pound list as a result of former unified flyweight champion Marlena Esparza losing all her titles on the scales and thereby creating a vacancy that another fighter must now occupy as a result of this.
You know what the rules are.
No fighter absent of a world title is allowed to maintain a rank, and as a result of Marlene losing hers, there's an empty spot that somebody needs to fill. And the fighter that is going to fill it is none other than the United Kingdom's own Ellie Scottney.
Of Catford.
Unified WBO, IBF, Ring Magazine Super Bantamweight champion Ellie Scottney, who's beaten two world champions and taken their titles from them. First was New Zealand's own Shernika Johnson for the IBF, and more recently, France's own Sigaline Lafarve for the WBO.
Why Ellie Scottney and not somebody else?
Because unbeknownst to most, even though Ellie Scottney doesn't have the most robust body of work, she doesn't have that many fights. What few fights she's had are against fighters that are a lot more experienced as professionals than she is. A former champion in Jorgelina Guanini, former EBU champion Mary Romero of Spain, alongside the two world champions that I just mentioned. These are fighters that most anybody and everybody else struggles with, but Ellie beats them, and she doesn't just beat them, she makes it look easy.
She does it in style.
It's worth noting that there are some other qualified champions out there in the boxing cosmos that are just as worthy of a rank as Ellie. Two-division champion of Germany, Tina Ruprecht, unified two-time light flyweight champion of Argentina, Evelyn Bermudez, Mexico's own Erica Cruz, who's been a champion at featherweight and is currently a champion at super bantamweight, the same division as Ellie.
As well as Franchon Cruz up there at super middleweight, a two-time super middleweight champion.
And we can't forget about two-division current reigning unified champion of Hartlepool, Savannah Marshall. Any one of these fighters, any one of these champions could occupy the same spot as Ellie Scottney.
Would be permissible, and it would be a good shout. Any one of them.
In a situation like that, there's really no wrong answer. What's important to note is that the top two pound-for-pound fighters on the list, Amanda Serrano and Katie Taylor, they're about to fight each other for the second time. And whoever wins, they'll stay on the list. But whoever loses,
You know what the rules are.
no fighter coming right off a loss is allowed to maintain a rank until such a time as they can get back in the winner's bracket. The list is only for winners and only for champions. In a situation like that, somebody's got to win and somebody's going to lose. The loser of the fight, whoever it is, Katie, Amanda, they'll be off the list, at least temporarily. And one of these other fighters, these other champions, may occupy their spot.
What's the logic behind that rule?
Well, different champions and different fighters could lose a fight for different reasons. You know, maybe it's just that on that night, you lost to the better fighter. That night, the other fighter was the better fighter, so you lost, but you can still get back in the winner's bracket. There's that, but there's also the beginning of the end. That maybe father time catches up, or the wear and tear.
That the fighter can no longer compete at the same level that they used to, and there's no going back.
To get back on the list in a situation like that, they have to get back out there and start winning fights. Winning fights is what got you here, and winning fights is what'll get you back. That's what it takes. So when a fighter loses a fight, we don't know what's going to happen after that. And until we do, they're off the list.
That's the logic.
The rationale, any one of those other fighters and any one of those other champions are interchangeable with Ellie Scottney. It could just as easily be one of them here, but I went with Ellie.
Points for style, because she always wins in style. She always makes it look easy.
The calculating Catford fighter is really something special, and it's about time she joined this pantheon of fighters. In men's middleweight news, reigning WBC interim champion of the Dominican Republic, Carlos Adames took to his social media to express his discontent. My career has been difficult since my presentation against Derevyanchenko and Montiel. Munguia ran for a year until he went to 168. Jamal avoided me for 2 years until he went to 168. Elijah says he's too young. Lara says he is weak.
PBC can't make fights for this guy.
Canelo says I'm a risk and I don't have a name. Janibek is scared. What do? I sent a contract 2 months ago to Haney from England,
I think he means Nathan Heaney.
who I thought would have the balls to fight, and he never signed. Cowards!
So look,
After Carlos Adames lost to Patrick Teixeira years ago down there at 154, he parted ways with Top Rank sometime after that, and he washed up on the shores of the PBC, and they kept him busy for a time. They got him some fights, Sergey Derevyanchenko, Juan Macias Montiel, but now it seems that relationship's
worn out.
there are middleweights there. He mentioned a few of them. Unbeaten Elijah Garcia, reigning WBA middleweight champion, Arislandi Lara. Jermall Charlo's been there the whole time. What, if any, effort from the PBC has been made to put Jermall in the ring with Carlos?
None.
Know the answer to that question, but then the question becomes, if Jermall doesn't want to fight Carlos, or they just don't want to make it, they think it's more expensive than it's worth. And Jamal's not going back down to 160. We all know that. Why don't they at least get Carlos the WBC title? I mean, can't they at least do that for him so he can perhaps unify with somebody else? Because right now all he has is an interim title.
That's it.
Reigning unified middleweight champion Janibek Alamkanalai caught wind of Carlos Adames' gripes, claiming that Janibek was scared. Janibek says, scared? Good joke. You are easy work. I heard that you don't want to fight me.
Is he scared?
I don't think he is. In fact, I think Janibek is just as starved for good competition as Carlos Adames is. That's the situation. That's what I think. The difference is that his team and his promoter has at least gotten him one unification match, one other full title, 2 titles in total, whereas Carlos's handlers, they haven't gotten him any.
They still haven't gotten him a full title.
It's a double-edged sword. On one end, it seems that Carlos's team aren't working hard enough for Carlos, but at the same time, Janibek,
His team.
have they made Carlos Adames an offer yet? Because Carlos, I think, would put on a more inspiring performance than, say, Danny Dignam or Jason Quigley.
He's a better fighter than a Denzel Bentley. He's even a better fighter than former IBF champion Vincenzo Gualtieri,
Who Janibek fought in his last fight, who Janibek stopped in his last fight. Yeah, I dare say that Carlos would put up a better fight than any one of those guys. But what is Top Rank actually doing to make such a fight? To make a fight between Janibek and Carlos. So, as stated, it's a double-edged sword.
Pendulum swings both ways, and so does the blame.
Recently, the Crawford versus Madrimov undercard was announced, and you will notice a good number of PBC fighters, guys that normally box on PBC shows, and that gets the old brain thinking, well, why can't Turki Al-Sheikh make a similar investment in the men's middleweight division? Maybe he can pay for a Janibek versus Adames fight. Better yet, maybe he can pay for Janibek versus Lara, a unification match for 3 of the 4 major titles. With so many of these PBC guys jumping ship and joining other promotional outfits, fighting under other banners on other platforms, and the amount of PBC fighters we see here, what's going on with Carlos that he's not one of them?
I mean, yeah, Turki Al-Sheikh could always work his magic and find use for Carlos, but it's not all on him either. The promoters have to do their job.
Turki Al-Sheikh is already greatly supplementing the effort in the boxing market in the UK, the boxing market in America, that we can't place the entire burden on him to make things happen. These promoters, they need to make things happen too.
Well, who promotes Carlos Adames?
It's hard to say because of the PBC's infrastructure. What the PBC really is a conglomerate of smaller promotional outfits that work together and do shows under the PBC banner, under the PBC umbrella. Which one of them specifically promotes Carlos? I'm not sure, but it seems to me that if they can't get you Elijah Garcia, and they can't get you Arislandi Lara, and they haven't even tried to get you Jermall Charlo, maybe it's time to leave.
There's a lot of small outfits over there that make up the PBC.
Mayweather Promotions, TGB Promotions, that's Tom Brown, Samson Lukowicz, and some of his fighters. I think Chino Maidana had a couple of guys over there. I'm not sure that they're still there now.
Manny Pacquiao Promotions, those guys you see with Sean Gibbons.
That's what the PBC is. It's a cumulative, a conglomerate of smaller promotional outfits that make up the PBC. Which one of them promotes Carlos? Which one specifically? I don't know.
But he needs to leave.
There's nothing happening. He's already been there for what, 2 or 3 years now?
They have less fight dates this year than they had last year. They're doing way less shows this year than they did last year.
Yeah, even if they have 1 or 2 or 3 bodies at middleweight that you might want to fight, they're not making those fights. So maybe it's time to change the decorum. Hell, maybe it's time that you go back to Top Rank, because Carlos used to be over there before he got beat by Patrick Teixeira. Maybe it's time to go back.
Something's gotta happen.
I don't think that Janibek is scared of this guy. Like I said, I don't think Janibek's intimidated by him at all. And I think that Janibek is just as starved for a live body as Carlos is.
PBC's not getting you Elijah Garcia. They're not getting you Lara. They're not getting you Charlo. Then what the hell are you still doing over there? Can he leave?
Something needs to happen. It's the most I can see. So upstairs, in men's heavyweight news, Anthony Joshua has declared that his next fight is being planned for either September 20th or the 21st at Wembley versus the Deontay Wilder versus Zhilei Zhang, or Philippe Hrgovic versus Daniel Dubois winner. The one who looks the best, he, Turki Al-Sheikh, said to me, "I want you to fight him." But who is he, or who will he be?
Will it be Wilder?
On potentially fighting Deontay Wilder, Anthony Joshua said, let's go, 110%. I think that if he goes out there and looks good, that will kind of reignite that flame that he had. Boxing is all about perception. You can look bad in one fight, go out there in the next, and look good. Then everyone says, yeah, he's back. Whichever one His Excellency wants, I'm ready. I think that out of that short list of names, those 4 fighters, the fight that yields the most marquee value would be Wilder, but it would be Wilder in a situation where he knocks out Zhang, and a lot of people don't think that he's going to.
Why is that fight bigger than the others?
Because that fight, unlike the others, would capture the interest of 2 boxing markets and not just one. The UK fans, of course, who regularly back Anthony Joshua fight by fight, there's those fans, but there would also be the American fans, the people here in America who, if Wilder does get the job done against Zhang, they might get behind him again and support him. And that would lend itself to that fight's profile and commercial value. I mean, let's face it, Joshua versus Wilder has a hell of a lot more backstory than Joshua versus Hrgovic, Joshua versus Zhang, or even Joshua versus Dubois.
The Wilder fight, if Wilder makes it through Zhang.
In a very general sense, the Wilder fight would be the biggest fight for Anthony Joshua out of that short list of names. The second biggest fight would have to be Daniel Dubois.
What?
Yeah, that could be very big in the United Kingdom. Very big. You know the Brits. They love a good domestic clash, and you can't forget what that Wembley show is supposed to be. That's supposed to be the second installment of the Matchroom versus Queensberry tournament. That's what's supposed to be on the undercard. So let's say Wilder don't make it through Zhang, but Daniel Dubois does make it through Philippe Hrgovic. That would be the second biggest fight, and another chapter, another installment of a Matchroom fighter versus a Queensberry fighter, which would be, especially in that situation, in keeping with the decorum.
And very sellable.
Remember that we're talking about Wembley here. Remember that we're talking about a UK show where you're trying to sell tickets to a UK audience. You can broadcast it wherever you want, but on the ground,
You're selling it to Brits.
and Anthony Joshua versus Daniel Dubois in a situation where Daniel beats Philippe Hrgovic. However he beats him, on points or by way of knockout. That could be very big. The second biggest fight I think you can make
And the third.
is Big Bang Zhang. In a situation where Wilder doesn't make it past Zhang and Daniel doesn't make it past Philippe, in that situation, the best fight you could make is the Zhilei Zhang fight. Zhang...
I heard something about Zhang bringing in astronomical numbers in his native China for what was the Joe Joyce fight, the Joe Joyce fight. Zhang has been calling out Anthony Joshua in recent years. It's a fight that he says that he wants. He wants to avenge his loss to Anthony from the amateurs here in the pros. If he beats Wilder, he may yet get his chance. But as stated, Zhang has to beat Wilder. And in that situation, Philippe would have to beat Daniel, because if Philippe doesn't beat Daniel, the better fight to make...
better fight is the Dubois fight, the more marketable fight, the more sellable fight in the United Kingdom. That if you have to choose between making Joshua versus Dubois or Joshua versus Zhang, Joshua versus Dubois is bigger.
sells better.
What about Joshua versus Hrgovic?
Well, I'm not trying to poo-poo all over that fight. I'm just evaluating the marquee value of each individual fight, the potentiality.
Potential of him fighting Wilder or Dubois or Zhang or Hrgovic, and there's more demand for some of those other fights with some of those other fighters than there is demand for a Philippe Hrgovic fight. Even if he wins, even if he beats Daniel Dubois.
That's the fight that people are asking for the least. That doesn't make it a bad fight. That's just saying that fight doesn't yield as much marquee value as the others.
Now, how's it going to play out? How is it actually going to break down? What do I think? Well, Deontay Wilder, he didn't show much spirit with Joseph Parker late last year. So what are the chances that he's going to show even more spirit with a bigger guy who's a bigger puncher and is a well-schooled amateur?
I haven't seen the betting lines yet, but I'd wager that Zhang is likely going into this the favorite over Deontay Wilder. I think he's the favorite. I think that Philippe Hrgovic is the favorite over Daniel Dubois.
And if he's not, he should be, because he's a well-schooled amateur. I believe that he bronzed in the Olympics, and I understand that Daniel is coming off a big win over then unbeaten Jarrell Miller. But Jarrell Miller is a different guy to Philippe Hrgovic, different physical dimensions, a different style of fighting.
It's a different fight.
So what you find is that the most commercially viable fight involving these four fighters doesn't necessarily make it the likeliest fight to happen. Wilder is a bigger fight. A fight with him is a bigger fight than a fight with any of the other guys, but who says Wilder makes it past Zhang? He might not.
And who says Daniel makes it past Philippe?
When I think about Dubois versus Philippe, while Daniel's a big kid, and he's strong, and he's explosive, he still doesn't move his head. And this isn't a short, stocky Jarrell Miller, short compared to Daniel, at least. No, this is a more statuesque Philippe Hrgovic, who is eye level to Daniel Dubois, and if he plays his cards right, he can jab his head off.
Same way Joe Joyce did.
God only knows Joe Joyce is not the fastest guy with the snappiest jab, but he kept that lead hand out there and he couldn't miss Daniel Dubois with it. So who's to say Philippe don't do the same thing?
He might.
He has the physical dimensions, the height, the length, and the pedigree, the ring coverage to do it.
What does all this mean?
But it's not quite clear who Anthony's going to end up fighting next.
It's murky right now.